IoT with Meadow and Wilderness Labs with Jeff Julian.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast, deliver quality, and to run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that the .NET ecosystem has to offer. The podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a full-service software architecture and engineering firm empowering software delivery projects. My architect forums are going strong. Quick announcement, the signups for the next session are up, and there's plenty of training and professional development out there for individual developers. But if you lead a software team and are looking to collaborate with some of your peers out there who are also leading software teams, then just go ahead and sign up at the link in the show notes. And for those of you who are looking for my Programming with Palermo video podcast, you can just search for it in any of the directories and you'll be able to find it. And my guest today on the show is Jeff Julian, and he's a longtime software developer. He used to run the Geeks with Blogs blogging site when developer blogging was the peak of social media before Twitter. And he's received multiple Microsoft MVP awards, and he's spoken at many conferences over the years. So he's retired from the software development community, and now he runs a local farm where he's custom developed a farm operating system using IoT devices, electronics, and more. And Jeff, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
Hey, doing well. It's nice to see a familiar face from back in the day, back when tech eds were the pinnacle of the conference world, and everybody had some great time at your parties. And
yeah, that's right.
You can't find a good conference like those back in the day. I mean, they were amazing.
They were a lot of fun. 16,000 people crammed in a massive conference center that you could walk for days and still try to get to your session.
Yeah, there was 4 years I just didn't ever attend a session. It's got so many things going on because we don't always do tech ed bloggers or PDC bloggers. We took that over for Drew Robbins back in the day, and those are a blast.
Yes. And for any of the younger listeners out there who maybe never have gone to a large developer conference, you can go and you can sit and you can listen. But if that conference is capturing the content on video, plan ahead, because it's hugely valuable to meet people and talk with people. And if you're going to get the speaker content on video anyway, it's not critical that you sit in the actual room if there's, other additional in-person interactions you could be having. That's my opinion.
Oh, totally. And these developer celebrities, they're not like real celebrities. They're normal guys that just, their face and voice. And if you see them standing there by themselves or it's a couple people, go up and introduce yourself, talk to them. They'll make room for you and talk to you and give you advice or whatever. I remember my very first event. I was 19 years old. It was eDevCon. And Scott Gu and Rob Howard were introducing ASP+. So it was ASP.NET, but that was what it was originally called. And Dave Weiner, the creative RSS, was there in SOAP, which was a web service protocol that we used for years. He was a smoker, and I was a smoker at the time. So I'd always coordinate my smoking with his smoking so I could go out there and chat with him. And I'm telling you what, that was the best college experience you could have.
For sure. What was that, around 2000, 2001?
Yeah, back in 2000, 2001.
Yeah.
The Adobe guys had to sneak me into the bars because I wasn't old enough to drink.
Wow. So you've done just a ton of software development, and you ran a software consulting company for a while, but I want you to tell your story about how you decided to stop doing what you were doing in regular software world, software day job, and decided to start applying programming to farming?
Yeah. So at first, I had a pit stop in the marketing world. So about 10 years after we started Geeks with Blogs, I realized that I was doing more marketing, building a content management system, right? That we did content marketing, we engaged with influential people, we helped build up their brands so that our brand would be bigger. And, we had at the time 2 million visitors a month and over 3,000 bloggers. And it was awesome. And so I was like, I should take this to the marketing world. And when I got to the marketing world and I started looking at where their gaps were, they really needed agile. So the planning was worse than waterfall. And so I really invested some time into coming up with a book and building some curriculum around how to incorporate agile into content marketing or just traditional marketing efforts. And I spent a lot of time, about 5 years, really focused on that, going around training teams, working on large content management systems using Sitecore, which is based in .NET, and just bringing the developer world to the marketing world. And it was great. But then after a while, we shut down the agency, and I kind of brought all those projects in-house to myself. And we were doing a lot of traveling around the world. The pandemic happened and all that stuff. And so we said, what would it be like to buy some land? And so we bought a 10-acre plot that was about 20 minutes from our house. And literally after we signed the contract, the largest logistics park in the United States was planned around our property. So they're going to build buildings that are larger than our 10-acre plot, individual buildings. And immediately when you're thinking about like having bees, doing goats, not using any chemicals, kind of that holistic and regenerative model, having all concrete around you is not good.
Right.
So we sold that. We found another piece of property a little bit closer to home. This time it's 35 acres.
Nice.
And got out there and got our first goats, moved the chickens from our backyard out to the farm. And immediately you're hitting the head with problems like power, right? So if you don't have power to the property, we see all these solar panels and all these, little power unit boxes that people sell for around $1,000. I'll just get one of those. Well, those things, they're horrible.
They don't
if you're
go very
using that
far.
for your emergency backup, it's going to last an hour and then your refrigerator's going to die. So I really had to dig into the tech side of farming, and everything is expensive. And from running a company, like the first couple of years are lean and you're losing money and all that stuff, but then you have to show profit. Well, if you're billing a couple $100s an hour, it's pretty easy to show profit if your only expense is the employee that you're paying and you're billing at the same time and the $30,000 laptop you bought.
Yeah.
But on a farm, that $40,000 tractor that if you need a tiller, that's another $5,000. If you even look at hay, it's $30,000, and then you go to sell it, and you've only sold $2,000 worth of stuff. Or we sell eggs at $4.
Yeah.
Well, that barely covers the cost of feed, and so immediately you're like, I have to figure out how to optimize this. And that architect, that consultant, that software developer inside you is the whole time raising his hand going, ooh, pick me, right? Because he's solved problems for decades, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really when I dug in to see what it would look like to start building components and software. And I was thinking, let's just use mini computers, because you can get those for a couple $100 from like B-Link or something like that, and throw .NET on there and then use a bunch of USB attachments. I had no idea what the world of sensors and relays and microcomputing and electrical engineering had. I was thinking of, the home user experience when it comes to smart homes and things like that. You just plug it into something and then you open up a different app, and then that's how you get to it. But very quickly you learn the limitations and pitfalls of things like that. So Yeah, so it opened up my eyes to seeing what was out there, and that's kind of when I saw Wilderness Labs and Meadow and what they were trying to do.
Nice, nice. So I'm fascinated by this because I haven't done the whole farming thing, but I've done the chickens, and I've I've I had my kids sell it, and then I've looked at how much I'm buying for feed, and then the chicken coop. I'm like, man, what's the economic model here?
Yeah,
So
it's like the guy who gets into tomatoes and he spends $200 to get $5 worth of tomatoes,
right.
right?
Oh, totally. And
Yeah, and that's oh, go ahead.
and then a raccoon comes and just wipes it out, and you gotta start over.
Yep. Yeah, I quickly signed up for my tax stamp so I could get a silencer
Oh yeah,
because
exactly.
raccoons are a problem, and so you need some way to be really quiet. Take them
Right.
out. And so yeah, that's it. Like we one time we went to a George Strait concert and it got over. I think we got home at 10 and we didn't close our chicken coop door because we closed it at 8. And a
Mm-hmm.
raccoon got in there and they're vicious. They just bite the heads off of things and leave the
And then leave
body.
them.
And they bite off as many heads as they can. And you're like, this is so wasteful. Like,
Yeah.
but you're thinking about like if you have a bird for 6 months to be able to lay an egg, you've got over $25 worth of feed in that bird and
Yeah.
$5 into that bird
Yeah.
to lay one egg.
Yep. Yep.
And you have to keep it alive for at least a year to be able to return on the investment. And then you get another year or two out of it to actually have profit.
Yeah.
Yeah. The farming world is so slim on the margins. And it's kind of like software consulting is when you look at that Fiverr community,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like everything's a really low bill rate and everybody's like just like fighting for like these $10 gigs. And it's like
Yeah.
you're never going to be profitable doing that.
Right.
And that's farming is that same way. Like you have to hit a point where you can get bulk and you can get enough customers and you can cut out all the middlemen and just go direct to your customer. And so we sell all of our everything we get. We do dairy goats and we do eggs and we do meat for chickens and turkeys.
Mm-hmm.
We sell all direct to customer.
Nice.
Because that's the only way you can actually think about at some point turning a profit.
Right. Right. So, what are some of the things that you've automated?
Okay, so the very first project and Meadow is a microcontroller. It's also a set of APIs and a set of libraries that all are based on .NET. So you open up Visual Studio, you create a new Meadow project, and you start writing .NET, and it feels like a console app because pretty much is. You're it, the Meadow controller, it puts your software on it using Mono, and then after it initiates and gets everything ready to go, it gives you access to all the different inputs and outputs and sensors that it has on the chip, but then anything you attach to it. And you're sitting there writing C# and you say, okay, I need to turn on this relay. And you can think of a relay as I have a very low voltage point of 3 volts, but then I need to control something like a light socket that has 120 volts. Well, I can't just like jump in between
Right.
and send 120 volts through the system. I have to have something else that relays that 120 volts signal to say, hey, go through. And that's kind of what a relay is. And then sensors are things that are out there collecting things like temperature, humidity, light, water, whatever it is, and sending you back voltage. And that voltage coordinates with a level. So at 100%, it might be full voltage, and at 0%, it might be no voltage. And we know, with digital and analog, we've all seen the waves, right? When it's at the peak, it's got a certain level, and then at the valley, and then based off of how high that wave is how much current's going through there. And as a controller or an IoT device, it listens to that, sends that to you in integer or decimal or whatever form you need it to, and then you make decisions based off of that. So we were getting ready to go into winter, and you have to buy hay for your animals because
Yep.
your grass stops growing. And with things like goats and cows and, even deer or whatever it is on your property, they need grass, and then you have to feed them other inputs. So it could be grain and it could be hay, and all that stuff costs quite a bit of money. And there was there's been some talk about this new approach of producing grass in the wintertime, and it was called fodder. And the idea of fodder is just feed, but you would take a barley seed, and a barley seed can be put into water and then drained of water, and then add water and drain water and put under light, and it will grow to about 6 inches of grass in 8 days.
Ooh, that's awesome.
So now I can take 2 pounds of seed, put it in a tray, put some lights on it, control the water and the air that goes around, so that way you don't pick up mold and other things. Mold does grow in the winter. Most of the time it, just like parasites, the load goes down when it's cold. But if you're creating a warm environment like you do for germination, you will get mold. And so there are some different factors that you need to put into it, but you can produce 12 pounds of water and grass, right? Because the water is going into it, and your animals need water all year too. And it'll produce a pad of grass in 8 days. That was 2 pounds, and now it's 12. And a 50-pound bag of feed is $18 of barley. So you can immediately see you're getting a very big return on investment when you look at like other grains that are $20 that you would feed, and you would get maybe 6 feedings off of that one bag. Now you're getting, more like 20, 30 feedings off of the bag. And you're giving the animals things that they like in a time that they're not getting it. So I really wanted to drive into building that fodder system.
Now, when I think of hay, I think of acres. How much square footage of this? What did that look like? How many trays? How many shelves? How big of an operation?
Yeah, because you always need to, with dairy, you need to have some sort of grain incorporated in there. So we'd still have some feed, but literally this was it fit in a single car garage, and a set of homemade 2x4 stands that we rotated 4 trays a day. So every day I would grab 4 trays, and they're 10 by 20, and I would put seeds in a bag, soak it, and then I'd have something that would control the airflow in the bag, so that would make the seeds get ready for germination. So I'd take that bag, I'd put it into 4 trays, and then I would take the furthest along 4 trays and feed those to the animals. And so we take 2 for the goats, 1 for the chickens, and then we have a group of male goats that we would feed 1 to, or the turkeys at the time. And it would offset the cost of all the feed. And so you're just dealing with that much space. But it's very time consuming if it's not automated, because you're out there watering twice a day or 3 times a day. You're moving things around, you're getting things set up. And so I wanted to try to automate as much as I could in the parts that, like watering, I can automate the watering. I can just turn on some overhead water, let it run down there, and then make sure it adequately drains. Or my next version of the system, I'll flood a tray, and that tray will then flood the bottom trays, and then I'll empty that tray. So rather than watering up from top, because you get a lot of clogs and it's not as consistent, if I flood the entire tray and then drop it, that's how more of a hydroponics approach. Everything is going to get wet, and it's far easier to replicate that.
Many thanks to our podcast sponsor, ClearMeasure. ClearMeasure is a software architecture company that empowers clients' development teams to be self-sufficient, moving fast, delivering quality, and running their systems with confidence. Whether starting a new project or developing new technologies or techniques, ClearMeasure sets up your team to deliver world-class results. Learn more at www.clearmeasure.com. ClearMeasure, empowering software delivery.
ClearMeasure is also happy to be a sponsor of the video podcast, Programming with Palermo. Watch, learn, and program alongside Chief Architect Jeffrey Palermo. Videos are added weekly and available on syndicated locations supporting video podcast or by visiting palermo.network. Tune in today.
So for the programmers listening, I can hear them thinking, so where did the code come in? So what did you automate? So what did that exactly look like? How many devices? What is it doing?
Yeah. So for me, it's like, okay, lights. Well, you don't want to leave lights on all day. Lights are expensive, right? It's wear and tear on the actual LEDs for growing, but then they're 500, 600 watts. So you want to limit the time on that. So we'd stretch out a day, and I'd turn the lights on or off. So that's one thing I can do. I can put a relay on the Meadow, and then I can attach that relay to an outlet, and then whenever it's 7 a.m., I turn it on, and then the lights are on, and at 7 p.m., I turn it off. And that's something that, there's home automation things, there's light switches, there's even the timers that we all use at Christmas time, right? Just turn it and crank it and get it set up. But those aren't long-term solutions. Those are, proof of concept solutions. The reason we only use it at Christmas time is because if you had to do that all year round and like you lost power and it quit thinking, it quit knowing what time it was and all that stuff, it would just be a nightmare.
Right.
And then next, I have a fan. And I don't want to run the fan all the time because then I'll dry it out. So I have to do fans on an interval. And so now it's not just turn it on, turn it off. It's turn it on, turn it off, and then maybe measure, right? Measure the moisture level inside the trays. And you can do that at a temporary solution to find out what that frequency is. And I found if I just turned them on and off every 15 minutes, it got rid of the mold. And so, because you're also thinking of cost, every time I want a sensor to measure something, I'm introducing bias in there because I'm measuring from some point, either the middle, the edge, or whatever it is. And then that tray is either further or closer to the fan. And so I don't want to, if I measure, I have to be either consistent across the board and measure everything, or I have to use it for determining something that I can use with enough metadata to kind of decide on. So I'm turning the fans on or off there. And then now the water. I need to turn the water pump on. Well, what's a water pump? Like, what kind of water system do I need? There's all sorts of different water systems. So they tend to be higher amperage. So now I need to be able to turn that on just for a few minutes, let it soak everything, and then I got to turn it off because it's got to drain off. So all that water that's filled up in that tray needs to be able to come out, and then go to either a bucket where I'm pulling from to push it out up again, or a disposal area or something like that. So there's all these different pieces that come into play with a simple fodder system, and that's really where you start to get into the fun part of it, because you are dealing with, you've got this little screen that you put on your device. And for me, I designed custom circuit boards that had all the components on it and places for the screens, and the Meadow would kind of have its own slot in there. And then put it in a box so that way it was able to go outside and be in the elements. And, you're writing .NET, you're hitting debug, it's pushing it to the device, and all of a sudden everything's lighting up and telling you what's going on. And then the piece that the developer really gets into is the stuff I want to know when I'm not watching, right? So if the power goes out, I might want to have a heartbeat. And if that heartbeat doesn't come, then I need to send an alert. And something like UptimeRobot, it's really easy to integrate with. It has the heartbeat technology in there, and it'll send you a text message. You could build your own pretty easily, but use some third-party tools to get started.
And you said UptimeRobot?
Yeah, UptimeRobot's great
Nice.
for website monitoring.
Okay.
So if you have if you have a website and you want to make sure it's online, you can say, hey, hit my website and then look for these words. And if you don't see these words, then there's something wrong.
Nice.
But then the other way around is, hey, I have I have this device that can call you, and every 10 minutes it's going to call you. But if you haven't heard from it in 30 minutes, let me know. And that really helps on those notifications that happen when things are bad. But then there's notifications that I need to know about, like, hey, the water supply is low, or hey, the fan didn't trigger, or that one sensor that you had, it says it's dry, right, for moisture level. There's all different things you can do. The temperature's too high or it's too low. That give you, and this is where the farm aspect comes in. When you're getting started on a farm and you're not full time, all my money's coming in from a farm and the sale of farm, usually you're doing other stuff during the day. And that's when trouble happens. So if this fodder system, if the power went out and I didn't know about it until that evening, I come in, well, guess what? We're going to probably lose a day, two, or if I have 7 days worth of trays on there, potentially all of them, right?
Yeah.
Could be a loss if I didn't check it on that interval every single day. If I can automate it, then I'm going to walk away and I'm going to try to forget about it. That's when that trouble strikes. And so you really have to start building in, and that's where your software, comes into play, where you're thinking of the else statement, right? So what do I do if it's not normal? And that's when a lot of the fun stuff comes on, because you got these little devices that have little Wi-Fi antennas on them, but they might be way out of Wi-Fi range.
Yeah.
So then you start looking at other technologies like LoRaWAN or being able to do Bluetooth connecting when you drive your four-wheeler by, right? And then it connects to another device that's on you. There's so many cool ways that you can think about getting data off of these devices that isn't pulling them off, plugging them into a USB stick and reading the information off of them. So
help us visualize a little bit more. How many F7 devices, or I'm assuming, are you, which of the Meadow devices are you using, and how many of them, and to get these done?
Yeah, so we have several Meadow devices, and I'm starting to work with the core compute, the smaller device, the little squares that they have that you then embed into your own chips, and you control the I/O. Essentially, everything's I/O exposed around the pins where you solder it down, and then you read with what you need to and ignore the other ones. But the F7 itself, it's got the pins on each side, and then you can say, okay, here's the digital ports, here's the analog ports, here's power, here's solar, here's how I hook up a battery. And so we have several F7s. I think I have like 20 of them, and they're all on different stages. So the first project, we called it Abraham because it's fodder Abraham. It produces a lot of fodder. And to stay biblical, the next project was Isaiah, and Isaiah is a messenger, and he brings the message out because we're all excited about EVs, and we're all excited about this alternative energy, and the folks who haven't played with it really believe in it. They believe in it like it's here. But it takes $4,000 worth of batteries to run one heat lamp all night.
Yeah.
And you're like, I just set up 12 batteries. Each they're made by Sony. I got them through an auction site. They normally sell for $3,000 a piece. I got them for a couple $100 a piece, but it's 25 kilowatt hours worth of lithium batteries. And I ran 3 freezers for 3 days before it was empty.
Yeah.
That's not a lot of power. A freezer is turned on and off, and it's like 300 watt load total.
Yeah.
If you think about your laptop and your monitors, that's a 300 watt load. It would take you $12,000 worth of batteries to run your laptop for 3 days. And then the solar panels, you're going to double the price of that to be able to refill them in time. So the technology just isn't there for large electric consuming pieces. So I need the ability to message that light and say, hey, this is an application. It's wintertime. Our goat just had a baby, and it's 6 degrees outside. I need to turn that light on. Well, if I can roll a sensor out to that light and then also power on that light, then I can say, hey, the temperature in here is now 40 degrees, turn the light on.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, the temperature is 60 degrees, turn the light off.
Yeah.
And now I'm not eating up all the batteries that I need to run the electric fence, to be able to run the pumps in the morning, or to be able to just make the farm work, because there are several areas on our farm that are completely off grid and
Yeah.
rely on us having battery. And that's critical. So Isaiah does that. He allows you to read sensors that attaches to the box, and then also run outlets to turn whatever you need on or off remotely. I'm a developer, so I'm cool with opening up SQL Server and sending an update statement, or having like a cheap ASP.NET app that will do it for me. But you could see how you could scale that up into a product. And then another big one that I'm working on now is Jeremiah. So Jeremiah, the project is for pulling water into filtered cisterns. So we have a pond and we're going through a drought just like you guys are today. Or yesterday I looked at the pond, and it's normally a few 100,000 gallons, and it's down to like less than 6 inches of water left. And so to be able to store that water when I have it and have it be clean for the animals is critical. But I don't want to go out there and turn on a pump and then have it run and do all that stuff. I need to be able to measure water levels, like we talked about earlier in the pre-show. And I also need to be able to turn on the water, actually have the water be able to flow through something to get it to another stage. So not just relays, but actually have water pipes that have the ability to have a solenoid on there to turn it on or off, to be able to close it or open it up. So turn on a water pump, open up the solenoids, allow water to flow a certain area. When it gets full, turn it off, and then monitor those water levels to make sure that we're running. And so in the Bible, Jeremiah was lowered into a cistern, and so he was stuck in the mud, and so he was their empty cistern. So that's kind of where the name of that came from.
Nice.
And,
Good, nice. I like the connections.
Yeah, we're always building. The key one that I got started with was the apiary. We had some problems with our bees this year. We had days where it would be 60, 70 degrees, and then within 2 hours it would be 20 degrees.
Oh, wow.
And the bees don't know that. So they're out. They're like, hey, it's warm. We got to get out of this box. And they go fly away, and they go do the thing. And then that box temperature is maintained by the number of bees in there and the amount of flapping we do of their wings to maintain the consistent temperature. And so if it drops and there's not enough there to produce heat, well, they'll die off.
Yeah.
And so we had that happen on a few hives. But one of the things I was really trying to do, and still am, is I want to be able to monitor that box. And then at first, just to know, like, hey, here's the amount of bees I have based off of the sound or the weight. Here's the heavier hives that might be ready for taking honey out of, or splitting off into another hive. There's all sorts of fun decisions you can do there, but that's a much smaller box. It doesn't need the relays for turning on or off things. It needs a bunch of sensors, right? It needs that scale underneath it. It needs the ability to get humidity, to get the temperature inside the box and outside the box. And then it has to be resilient enough to allow bees to build a bunch of stuff on it, because that's what they do. They cover everything in either wax or other bodily fluids that they use to seal up things. And so it has to be resilient enough. So that takes you down a whole nother path of building out devices. And since you don't have power, then you have to incorporate solar energy and lithium batteries of some sort. And if you go lithium, then you have concerns about freezing, right? Because you can't charge lithium batteries under 32 degrees Celsius for Fahrenheit. There's all sorts of fun little things you can do with these projects, but all of it can use that same Meadow and a same set of sensors, or maybe a different set of sensors. Some of it requires designing a circuit board to actually solder that sensor onto, and then other ones are just cables and other things you can attach a sensor in, hot glue it into a box, and you're ready to go. There is no like glamorous requirement to build and deploy this stuff. So you can use, the little breadboards and just cables coming everywhere, and that's the solution you come with. You put it into your production, and you get going. And then there's all sorts of amazing technologies like SQLite and MQTT for communication, and just a slew of the community is so large because IoT isn't just Meadow. It's Arduino. It's Raspberry Pi. It's this just slew of IoT devices and manufacturers that are putting these sensors into all of our cars, into all of our large commercial buildings, and our HVACs all have these relays in them. So you can go on Amazon and buy pretty much anything you want and have it delivered the next day and get out and start building whatever you want to.
So these are tiny little computers, and for people who've used all the other IoT things, this is old hat, but for people who haven't done it yet, you mentioned SQLite, and that's the imagery of, well, shoot, that's just like a fully capable .NET application, just happens to be running on a tiny computer. How many of these tiny computers do you have running around? Is your strategy one relay, one board, or do you have multiple relay sensors? How much do you pack onto a single one before you say, you know what, maybe I can, but maybe I'm not going to? How do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think about that as the actual application itself. So I want to be able to make decisions without communicating with other devices, if possible, because I'm not guaranteed to have communication. Because these are deployed in places where they might not be close enough to the other one. So if I've got a weather station, and that's how I'm basing whether or not something turns on or off based off of the current wind, right? So I'm picking up a high wind, I need to turn things off on the farm. Well, I can't guarantee I can talk to all those things. And so when I think of it like I need as many sensors and relays to be able to perform the task I'm doing for that particular chip. And then the next one, even if it's sitting right next to it, but if it's doing a different job, and you can think of it kind of like a microservice. Every endpoint that you would have would be kind of a Meadow chip. And sometimes it might just be the controller, and you have a lot of endpoints because you're making it flexible for the developer. Really, you could have got away with one or two.
Yeah.
And so you sit back and you look at that and you say, okay, I want that to be there. And then also they're working on the over-the-air updates and things that you can do where you can just go into the Meadow cloud, put up your package, and then it'll send the package, update your device automatically, and then it's running new software. Until then, you are running around with USB and a laptop updating these devices to put new versions of stuff on there. So you don't want to have 20 of them doing the same thing one could do when it comes to the upgrade. And then after that, you're looking at power consumption. If you're using batteries and solar, and how big you need that power source to be, and then whether or not if it's big enough you can run multiple things off of, great. Then you could do multiple devices. So if I was building like a robot, I would have the main robot control. Like if it was moving around, I'd have that be its own Meadow. But then something like a camera system would be a separate Meadow. So that way it's single thought kind of thing.
Gotcha.
But once you get around that, there is a distance that some of these sensors can be away from the device using cables before the technology becomes not reliable. So most of them, like I2C and SPI and some of these other ones, are really short distance, so less than a foot. And then if you get in signal enhancers, you can go a little bit further, like 10 feet away. But it's very hard to get really long distance without having more complex bus systems for communicating and then power over those bus systems. So that's also another limiting factor, is how far away from wherever your Meadow is that you need to collect data.
Okay. And the last question before we're going to wrap up here. You mentioned the auto updating the package. By being in the Wilderness Labs Meadow ecosystem, what are the things that you get for free? Like I can imagine with this type of setup, you blow past the 5 devices, 10 devices, 20 devices, 30 devices. I mean, keep on going up.
Yeah.
From a management perspective and just knowing, hey, is this one like 100% busy all the time? Is this one hardly doing anything? Do you get that for free with the Meadow ecosystem, or what do you have to layer on top?
Yeah. So with Meadow, and this is the best thing about it is they are not Microsoft. They're a bunch of Microsoft fanboys like me, right? But they aren't Microsoft. So this isn't the HoloLens. This isn't the watch. This isn't the band. This isn't anything that was awesome that they killed. This is a company that has investors, that is building a product for commercial use, for large scale use, and also for developer and hobbyist use.
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of go to bed easier knowing that they're there, and that it's not going to get killed. Like I bought one of those stupid Azure cameras
Sphere
for $600.
Oh, Azure camera.
The camera is like $600 camera. You can't even use the webcam, and it does some pretty cool stuff. But it never made it out of beta, and then they killed the project a couple months ago. And you're like, I am so sick of large companies dismissing people trying to do innovative things and play with stuff. But with Meadow, you get a team that it's self-funded. It's a small company. But you get access to them. So you go jump on their Slack forum, and all the developers are there, and they're answering your questions within an hour of asking them. And they're all super smart guys. So that's the biggest piece that you get. Like you can sit there and talk to Brian, who was the founder.
He's been on the show.
And yeah, just ask him any question you want to, and he'll come back and hook you up with whatever you need to. And then with the Meadow Cloud that they're launching, that'll get you the ability to deploy over the air. And right now it's free. Who knows what the end price point will be? But it is. You will spend more on sensors than you do Meadow. Okay. So the price point is really low on that. And if you do get into like building devices and wanting to actually produce IoT solutions for commercial application, they have that breakpoint where you buy a certain amount and they go way down in price, and then you're looking at your PCBs and being able to have them soldered overseas or whatever it is, to cut costs even more. But then outside of that, they have the foundation, which is the sensors, it's the drivers and all that stuff that they're continuing to add to. That's free, that's open source. And then all the versions of Meadow that they put out, you'll get those for free, and it's all open source as well. And then the device, so you'll get something that'll last and keep going. And as long as you have your Visual Studio license and all that stuff, your game, and it works in Visual Studio Code too.
Nice.
So there's all sorts of great things that you get there. But then the ecosystem of IoT sensors and devices, and then once you get into it, then you're going to get into the 3D printing community because you need enclosures, and so you go buy, like we did, you buy a Bamboo Labs X1 Carbon. Now you're building stuff constantly on the 3D, and that community is huge too. So it feels like the .NET community once you get in there in all the aspects, and like the original .NET community, not the current one where they're like really weird, hateful, like we should fire these people because they produce whatever, right? Instead, it's this sphere of people learning, enjoying to share what they're learning, and are just like using each other to help grow their knowledge. And that's why I loved the .NET community back in the day, because that's exactly what it was. It's just this awesome world of people helping each other.
Nice.
And you'll get that in the Meadow community for sure.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, as we come up to the end of our show, I appreciate you coming on and sharing how you kind of automated aspects of your farm with Meadow and Wilderness Labs. And I know there's a lot that goes into that, but yeah, thanks for sharing that story. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, and I mean, if you guys have any questions, reach out to me on wherever, Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever, and we'll have tons. Now that it's starting to get into fall, this is like the fun part for me, right? Because normally it's spend hours outside doing the farm work, and then now when things start dying off and everything's not changing so frequently on the farm, now I get back in and start building out some of these devices. So
yeah, nice.
we'll get the fodder system rolling again, and it'll be so much fun.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, that was great. And for you, dear listener, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.